Alright, welcome back to the Business Insight Show. I am your host, Njerin Jogo. And so Kenya has been in a boom in the real estate industry in the mid-2000s, with this having an increase in properties. And today with me, I have Sharon Nelima, who is from Shave. And Sharon, welcome. And would you kindly tell us, introduce yourself to us, let us know who Sharon is.
Sure thing. I'm Sharon. I work at Safe Real Estate. It's a property development company, and I'm in the corporate sales department.
All right. So the first question, straight to the point, is that nowadays so many people out there, if for instance you give someone 100,000 and then ask someone, what are you going to do with that money? The first answer they tell you is that I'm going to buy a piece of land. Why do you think people are rushing into buying pieces of land, or why do you think people are into real estate today?
Well, shelter is a basic commodity. We have food, clothing, and shelter. So when you're awarded with money, you always think of security. So real estate, getting a land, getting a house is a form of security for your family, and basically it puts you in a position where you don't have to worry about rent anymore. So I believe real estate should be one of the top options and your priorities. When you do come across a sum of money, you should look into real estate.
So don't you think, or don't you feel like people are doing it too much, not considering even the amount of money they want? People just want to purchase land. Don't you think people are doing it excessively?
I don't think it can be excessive, Jerry. When it comes to feeling secure for your family, you don't know what might happen the next day to you, and you don't want your children thinking about where they're going to sleep, if they have a roof over their heads. So I don't think it comes at an excess at all.
So Sharon, maybe you can tell us, of late we have been hearing from the media and other places that the real estate is facing a housing bubbles. Lands are being bought, and sometimes they're becoming inactive. Don't you think that this is going to have an effect one day, one time, and it's going to burst out, like things are not going to work anymore?
Real estate is complicated sort of industry. A couple of years back, things were simpler. You'd get a piece of land by, say, 20,000, an acre with 100,000 or even more. But as the years have progressed, you find that the value of land has extremely inflated. We've had people who are selling a land that should be 50 million being sold at 200 million. So you find yourself as an investor coming on board, buying land for 200 million. You are promised return of investment in, let's say, 10 to 15 years. But then let's say you buy the land, start building, you find it's not as economical as you thought it was. Economy is still going down, which is one of the factors that's affecting real estate. So you find yourself building something, leaving it halfway, maybe expecting future money, but that doesn't seem to come. So I'd say it's a gamble, basically. It's a gamble. There are a lot of risks involved. So before you get into real estate, you should make sure you do your due diligence well. Always involve your lawyers, and don't put all your eggs in one basket until you are 100% sure of what you're buying and what you're going to do with your real estate.
So you said that the pieces of land are inflating so much, and nowadays you find that as they continue inflating, people's pockets, as you dig deeper, there's nothing. So what is going to happen to those people who have not bought lands by now? Maybe in 10 years to come, if I want to buy a piece of land, what is going to happen to me? And not forgetting, people nowadays are buying lands everywhere. Does it mean that one day, one time, they'll come to be like, there's no land to buy? What is going to happen to our generation?
What is going to happen in real estate, in my opinion, is people are going to be buying more land outside the urban areas. So we've been finding so many postings of Kangundo, Kitengela, and it's going to move on that way up until basically in maybe 50 years there wouldn't be any land to sell. Probably, in my opinion, we're going to start selling space above your land.
So
that's
what do you mean by
apartments. Standalone houses are going to be no more in a few years. We've seen South Sea It was a standalone estate, Mugoya, if you know it. Right now, the apartments coming up left, right, and center because people want to maximize their returns. So that's where we're going to head.
So what do you mean by space?
So when it comes to the population that is living in the slums, we've seen several initiatives that have come up over the years to better the conditions. We've seen the apartment complexes that were put up by Raila. We've seen the Kenya Railways ones. But the population doesn't seem to be willing to move. I'd say maybe it's a factor of the income. Maybe it's a factor of the environment. So I'd say that is still a pending issue.
Right. So talking about that, there are people whom you find they go to the deserted places and they start building these rental houses or real estates in there, and there's no water and there's nothing. What do you have to say about that? Are they risk takers?
They are. And maybe they're just speculative. You know, in real estate we have investors and we have real-time investors and speculative ones. So real-time investors come on board to build a project in maybe 1-2 years, get the money, return of period, return of investment in let's say 2-3 years, payback period in about 4-5 years. And then we have now the speculative investors. Speculative investors are the kind of people who buy land in the deserted places, as you've mentioned. Let's say Kajiado, Kitengela, Kangudo. They bought them, say 2 years, 3 years back. If you look at those places now, the price has escalated than it was. So they buy land, hold it, and resell. So that sort of thing. So when you see some people buying land outside, let's say the predisposed areas that you're used to thinking about, think about the plans that are going to come back. We have Kangundo, it has the Eastern Bypass, Greater Eastern Bypass that's coming along that side. Those are people who knew such things are coming up. So when you hear there's a boom in a certain area, do your research before you get on board. There's so many other places. We have Magadi, we have people going all the way up to Emali, such places. You don't really know why they're buying, but if you're interested in such a place, I'd advise. You can even go to the city council. The plans are public. You can look into what infrastructures are going to come there, and then you can see if you can be one of those.
So maybe we can talk about taxation. Does it have any effect to the real estate sector? Because you find everything has to be taxed. What is your take on this?
Yes, it does. As in any other business, it has had a huge impact into real estate. We've had several people who are coming on board not really knowing they're supposed to pay tax. We have the land rates, taxes on even the apartments, stamp duty, and maybe the relief that was given by the president last year on the first-time homeowners has really helped. But then it's going to affect Kenyans for quite some time.
All right. So in upcoming areas, you find that people nowadays have started building real estate. Does it mean that now people will move from towns going back to their upcoming areas, or what is it with this? Because nowadays in every upcoming town you go, there must be a real estate. What is here? What is cooking?
Yes, people seem to be going back home. We've realized that over the time, people used to bank on inheritance back at home. But as time has gone by, we're seeing the scale of what they're actually getting from their parents is getting smaller and smaller. So people want to feel more secure. I go back to the security point I'd made before. And people want to go back to their roots at some point. You can't live in the city always. You can't be 60 still in the city. You have to have some security, something back home, and that's what most people are doing.
So Sharon, talking about the government here, President Uhuru Kenyatta earlier on spoke and told the country that he has the Big Four agenda, affordable housing being one of the Big Four agenda. Do you think the real estate is going to bring out something brighter when it comes to affordable housing, or is it going to help the government achieve its Big Four agenda?
Yes, I think real estate is going to really step up in accommodating that agenda. We have seen so many apartments that are coming up now. We have realized there's a need for more housing and affordable housing. Not just housing that some group of people can afford, but housing that everyone can afford. The housing complexes that are going to be put up by the government is a really good idea, but then I don't think it will it will be able to house the whole entire population of Kenya. So we do have some individuals who are going to be left out, who still want housing. And that's why we're seeing a lot of new plans and new innovations have been put up, installed for people to have affordable housing. We've seen real estate agencies like the one I work for, Safe Real Estate, coming up with payment plans of up to 12 years at a 0% interest. Unalipa kidogo kidogo for your house. You're able to live in it as you pay it off. So I think real estate is really becoming more innovative in that sense.
Nowadays you find there are landlords who have the real estate or maybe rental houses, and they wake up in the morning and they start telling you, you know what, from today the rent has increased. Is there anyone who is responsible for them, or what should happen in such cases?
What most people don't know, when you move into an apartment, you have to sign a tenant contract. So in the tenant contract, there are usually several clauses stipulated, from a warranty on fixing things to now increasing the rent. In most contracts, you can't increase the rent of an apartment if it's still inhabited by the same people who were there before. Or if you do, there should be a notice of more than 150 months for some contracts that I've seen. So your landlord is not at liberty to increase your rent the next month, just impromptu. There is some legal steps that you should take.
When talking about that, earlier on we used to hear the county government, I also stand to be corrected, saying that if you want to build a rental house in your area, no matter if it's your conclusion, it's okay. But if you want to build it, you have to maybe you have to be authorized by the county government. Could you please guide us on that?
That is a must, 100% a must, because there is urban planning. You can put up a house in the middle of nowhere, but then you remember there is still inlets and outlets for that house. There's still sewers that need to be connected to and from the house. And those are some of the plans that City Council looks into. What is the place where your house is going to be built? Is it near a sewer? Where is it going to be connected? Is it where a water supply? Where is it going to be connected? Is it a waterway? We've seen cases of houses being built on riparian land. So that whole process that involves the City Council, urban planning, NCA, all of it is just to make sure that your house should be there. Yeah.
And what about the houses which are built and you see them coming down? What do you have to say about that? Did the City Council feel on that?
Yes, definitely they did. They were cheated out of their money, unfortunately, because I'm sure they saw the plans and they didn't want to stick with those plans. So, yeah.
Right. So you find that right now so many people out there are still building these real estates, and sometimes without even knowing if there are people who are going to live there. And when you look at the slums, people are still there, very much congested. Is there hope for them?
Building a house to rent out is an entrepreneurship sort of pathway to take, and as any other business that someone can start, it has its own risks and it has its own income, yeah, that you expect. So before you decide to build an apartment, look into the area. Is there a school coming up near the place? Is there a road that's going to come up near the place? What are the infrastructures that are put near the apartment? Because these things factor into the amount of population or the amount of traffic that you'll have of people who are going to come into your apartments. You can't go into, tell me one place, let's say Kajiado, in the middle of nowhere, build a complex. Of course, you won't get traffic there. Go to somewhere like Upper Hill, where it's just offices. You know, even if you build an apartment that's going to be 25 floors, by the end of the year, as soon after completion, they will all be inhabited.
So maybe you can tell us, are there trends coming up when it comes to real estate?
Real estate. People are trying to be really innovative. We have seen, let's say, multi-phased sort of buildings where you find apartments with a mall, with churches, with mosques inside. They're creating cities, enclosed kind of community, which is a good thing. It's good to know your neighbor. And if you know most of you live in the same estate, security becomes a major factor. You have now the community thing, which we have lost a lot in Kenya. Not many people know their neighbors. So this sort of complexes, multi-phased ones, they're a really good thing. And now we also have now the new payment systems that we have. Mortgage has really, we thought it was a valid option. We thought it was a good innovation then, when the rates were about 7, 9, 10%. Right now they're at 13, making you pay almost over 200% the value of your land. So real estate has also coined up a new trend, whereby now we're giving now payment plans, 0% interest. The payment plans, they've been really tailored to the common mwananchi as at now. So I think real estate is really trying to innovate itself. It's more of like a phoenix rising again. Yeah, so all you have to do is just wait a bit.
All right, and maybe can you tell us about the perspective of the industry by now, 2019?
2019. Well, going back to the bubble that you talked about, people are in panic mode right now. People who own property, people who have been trying to offload property for more than a year, people who are developing property and they're not seeing the return of investment that they expected. They usually say there's usually 5 cycles to real estate, and it's a continuous one, where we have people have bought into property. The first 3 phases are where people, value of the property is increasing all the time. The first phase, we usually, let's say we are ignorant. The second phase is when we're seeing things happening, like overvaluation of land, demand of land is slowly going down, people are not buying, but then it doesn't really ring a bell. As we are on panic mode, which is the third phase. So here we're seeing property is really overvalued. There is no one to buy. Now, the next thing that's going to happen is going to be stage 4, where people are going to default on the mortgages they put. People are going to default on the loans they put to develop the land because there's no return of interest that they expected. Now, 5th one is now when the bank is going to take back what they have, or is when the real estate is going to really drop. The prices are going to go so low, which has been seen in some areas, like Australia the other day is facing the same crisis right now. Value of the house 5 years before and now is like almost half the price. So now people will start buying property again. So we go back up. So that's basically the cycle that real estate has in most economies. Yeah.
Right. All right. So maybe lastly, you can tell our viewers what are they supposed to check on, or what are they supposed to note on while purchasing or leasing real estate?
Okay, I will go through this on a step-by-step basis. Let's say as a buyer with money in the bank, or with a deal that's come through, I want to buy property. I will either approach an agent or I'll approach a real estate agency. From there, I'll be given a portfolio of projects that they have. They'll give me the projects they have. I see if they're fitting my budget or not. If I'm an investor, I look at the return of investment. Before I decide to say yes or say no, I have to involve a lawyer. Lawyers come in because they see the things you don't see. You'll be taken to an apartment, like the space, like the finishing. You'll be taken to a land, like the area, like the infrastructure around it, but you don't know the stories behind that apartment. Now that's where lawyers come in. So the lawyer will do the search for you, tell you if this title is legitimate, tell you if there's any wrangles involved with this land, and finally tell you if this is a go-to place or not. Then from there, that's when you decide whether you're going to take it or not. Yeah? Right. Yes. So when you take it, there are also other processes that also involve the lawyers, your lawyers and the seller's lawyers. So they all come into an agreement. You're given your sales agreement. Make sure you sign a contract. Don't put money without signing a contract. Yeah, that's what people get tripped up a lot of times. You make a deposit without any legal contract or any binding agreement. Find yourself, you sold the apartment to someone who's not existing. Yeah, so make sure you sign a contract, and make sure you sign the contract with someone who owns the piece of land. That way you're secured, your money is secured. Yeah.
All right, so that was quite an interesting